when the Mongols set their eyes on taking over all of Europe, the first country they had to take over was the Christian kingdom of Georgia. But Georgian warriors were no rookies. They had destroyed many Muslim armies before, so when the Mongol army attacked, the Georgians were pretty darn confident. The Mongol army charged the Georgians, fired a few volleys, and then bam, ran away, acting like they're in full-on panic mode. But that was all part of a Mongolian mind game to lure the Georgians into a trap. The Georgian army, thinking they were the big dogs, took the bait and ran after the Mongols on their horses. But see, the horses were not all cut from the same cloth. Their speed and stamina was different. So slowly, the Georgian warriors were separated. And just when their horses started to wheeze like a retiree after a jog, bam! The Georgian warriors were greeted by a squad of Mongol warriors that were waiting to cut them down. And cut them down they did. Within just a few hours, the Georgian army was toasted, and now Georgia belonged to the Mongols. The Mongols were ready to leave more marks on the map, now in Europe. Genghis Khan's greatest Mongol leaders, Jebi and Subutai, took a field trip to Eastern Europe to gather information about the city's location, political division, and their rivals. Turns out European rulers had more drama than a soap opera. Despite sharing the same Orthodox religion and speaking Russian, everyone had their own set of enemies. And in 1223, Subutai tested them. He thought, let's see how they handle unexpected guests, and parked his forces near the Dnieper River. These Christian cities, smelling trouble, did the unexpected. They managed to join forces to fight the outsiders. 3 of those armies out of Kiev, Chernigov, and Galich were under the command of princes. Game on. As the Russians advanced, the Mongols sent 10 ambassadors to talk peace or form an alliance, but the Russians executed every last one of them. To the Mongols, this was a serious breach, and now a high price would have to be paid. The Mongols pulled out the same stunt they did with the Georgians. They fought the Russians and ran back like cowards, pretending they were afraid to fight such a powerful foe. The Russians took the bait and chased the Mongols for days. Their armies split up because each horse had different speed. After a wild 2-week chase, the Russian vanguard finally caught up with the Mongols at the Kalka River. Jebi, the mastermind, had set the stage. The Russians, thinking they had the upper hand for catching up, quickly drew up the battle lines for attack. 80,000 men on the Russian side, at least twice the amount of the Mongols. But those Russian soldiers were mostly country folks, peasants, promised an easy win. Oh, how wrong they were. The Mongols showed up, absolute silence. The Russians thought the Mongols would fight them head on, but instead of clashing head on, they stopped just out of the Russians' reach and started to rain arrows on the Russians. The Russians saw their fellow soldiers dropping in pools of blood, unable to counterattack. Their clubs and spears were as useful as forks while eating soup. Arrows all around, but the Mongols had designed their arrows to be useless for Russian bowstrings. The Russian archers stepped up and tried to come to the rescue, but their weaker bows meant shorter range. Few hit their marks. The Mongols took the Russians' arrows and fired back at them. The Russians were now in full-on panic mode, hastily retreating. The Mongols chased them down. Chaos ensued as the retreating Russians collided with the fresh columns of new Russian soldiers. The Mongols followed them, picking them off one by one, slaughtering the Russians all the way back to the Black Sea, where the campaign began. Legend says that from the large army sent out to fight the Mongols, only every 10th soldier returned to his home. That's right, an Asian force didn't just invade Europe, they bulldozed through it, leaving nothing but chaos and a trail of what just happened behind. After the Mongols destroyed the Russian army, they went to Crimea to celebrate their great victory. Their guest of honor was the defeated Russian prince and his 2 sons-in-law. The Mongols wrapped the 3 of them in felt rugs and stuffed them beneath the floorboard of their gurs, the Mongol house, slowly crushing the men as the Mongols drank and sang through the night on the floor above them. This was a clear message: do not mess with our ambassadors.